Hello, everyone. This is Kevin Plexico. I'm Senior Vice President of Information Solutions at Deltek. I want to thank the APMP and the Chesapeake chapter for the invitation to present to you, and hopefully can provide some useful content and insights on what's going on in the government contracting space. Uh, Currently, we're going to be talking about the GovCon trends, the government contracting trends, and especially the impact of the new administration. Obviously, the Trump administration is come in like a lion with a lot of actions and changes, and we're going to spend some time talking about some of those changes, what to look for, some inflection points, as well as what to expect in terms of opportunities and issues that you all will hopefully be successfully navigating in the year ahead. I thought I'd highlight some of the top trends that we think are the key trends to watch in the year ahead. Obviously, the new administration is going to touch a little bit on all of these. We'll start by talking about the budget and spending uncertainty. We're obviously in the middle of fiscal year 2025, and we still are operating under a continuing resolution that extends into mid-March. So we have the next round of whatever's going to happen with appropriations to get resolved, hopefully to put to bed 2025 appropriations for the balance of the year. And we're going to talk about what we've seen in terms of impacts on spending year to date and what we expect for the rest of the year in light of that. We're also going to talk a bit about some of the small business trends and policy changes. One of the biggest changes that we expect and have already started to see is the reversal of some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies of the Biden administration, and where that impacts small business in particular is in the small disadvantaged business category, or for the most part, what's executed through the 8A program, where we've seen the goals that the SBA has issued to agencies reduced back to just a flat 5% for each agency, coming off of what was going to be a 15% target for the year under the Biden administration. So clearly a reversal back, and I think some questions at some point about the direction and viability of the 8A program, which we'll touch on a bit as well. There's a number of technology initiatives that we're seeing unfold through the new administration, much more aggressive posture with artificial intelligence. We saw the reversal of the executive orders that the Biden administration had passed. So we're awaiting now new policy direction from the new administration with the freshly appointed federal CIO that was just appointed earlier this month, I guess end of January at this point. And then we'll talk about some of the other issues around compliance and acquisition reform, which is also creating some pretty significant challenges around contract consolidation in terms of the number of prime contract positions that are available for companies in the space. So lots to talk about, lots of issues to deal with. Let's go ahead and jump in. We'll start with the budget and a little bit of the environment there. I'm going to do a brief recap of 2024 and what we've seen in the trends in the past decade. As you look at the left side, civilian, it's been pretty much steady Eddie. We saw the spike as a result of the COVID relief funds and recovery efforts back in the 2020-21 period. And since then, it's been steadily increasing. And we saw in 2024 another year of just a slight increase in spending for the contract side for the civilian market. On the defense side, it's a bit more of a bumpy road, but definitely rapidly increasing. And then we saw a little bit of a step back, just ever so slightly in 2024. Now, for those of you who know the market, you'll know that the defense contract spending reporting is delayed by a quarter. In theory, we should have the full year of fiscal year 2025 through reporting that would have occurred in January, but we do sometimes see some delayed reporting. So it's possible that $462 billion number on the defense side will increase a little bit. So I would really think about that 24 versus 23 number as essentially a flat year for defense contracting. And we're expecting for 2025, barring major changes to federal agency budgets in total, that we're going to have another relatively flat year for 2025, especially since we've been operating under a continuing resolution for 25. And then we have to wait and see what happens with the budget request for 26. I thought I'd put a little bit of a spotlight on small business contracting. This is looking at federal procurement data system data reporting, identifying which awards were to other than small businesses versus which awards were to small business. You can see small business has been steadily growing, almost a consistent drumbeat of increases on the small business front, a little bit of a decrease in the on the other than small, and that probably corresponds to the defense decrease. If you think about defense spending, they have a much harder or higher percentage of dollars that are spent with other than small businesses, given the nature of spending on the aerospace defense platforms that they have in the defense market. So when we see decreases in defense spending, it's not uncommon for that to correspond to a decrease in that other than small category, since they tend to go hand in hand. But overall, the small business category has been remarkably stable and a steady growing sector, and it increased about 2% in 24. As we look at 25, we did want to sort of compare what we're seeing in terms of spending for the same period of October 1st through, this is through the end of January, and what we saw in terms of reporting in 2024 through that period versus what we're seeing for fiscal year 25. Not too surprising, given the delays in funding, the election uncertainty. Agencies have been holding their funds pretty close to the vest as they wait for visibility and clarity around what full year fiscal year 25 funding is going to be. Spending from a contracting point of view is down about 20% versus last year on a year-to-date basis. Now, keep in mind that's easily made up in the second half of the year if continuing resolutions get resolved and we get full year appropriations in place. And we expect what's going to happen is they're going to get appropriations that are relatively in line with 24, and then we're going to have a major upswing in fourth quarter of fiscal year 25. So we expect a very active fourth quarter as we normally do, but especially active this year given the combination and confluence of events with the continuing resolution, as well as the election and administration transition. On the right-hand side, you can see sort of year-to-date contracting compared to prior year by agencies. So certainly the delays in appropriations have affected agencies on an uneven basis. State Department way behind, as well as agriculture and HHS versus prior year. But then there's other agencies that are much more, kind of in line with what they've been spending in the past. So this just gives you a sense for how the disruption is impacting agencies on a year-to-date basis. I'm referring to the fiscal year-to-date basis, which we're looking at here through January. Just some inflection points to pay attention to. Obviously, we talked about the rest of 2025 and what appropriations we may expect for the rest of this fiscal year. The debt ceiling is another issue that needs to be resolved. The debt ceiling suspension has expired, so the Treasury is doing what they call their extraordinary efforts to continue to keep cash flow moving. But at some point, the administration and Congress are going to have to do something about the debt ceiling. We have very rapidly approaching timeframe for when the FY26 budget would be released. It would normally be released here in early February, but under a presidential transition like we've had this year, we're expecting that to be delayed, probably well into spring. And then there's already discussion about moving forward on the legislative component of the Trump administration, which would be extending the tax cuts that have been in place for a number of years, which would be beneficial to businesses, some of the trade and deficit policies, what kind of cost cutting, and also the promise of the administration to put in place tariffs here on some of our major trading partners as well as China. As you think about the transition, it's important to note that it doesn't just begin or end at the election or at the inauguration. It's a rather lengthy process that begins with transition planning that got a delayed start with the new administration or the campaign at the time, negotiating with GSA on those memorandum of understanding to start the transition and the transition team work. Obviously, the inauguration day kicked off a flurry of executive orders and actions, some of which provide, I think, opportunities for companies to help agencies with the new policies of the new administration, and others are going to cause delays and interrupt initiatives. But it's important to recognize that even though the transition of power has taken place, many of the agency's political appointees and leadership positions remain to be filled. And this does affect things like the timing of rollout of policies, and the move of some of the new policies in terms of getting embedded into the agency, things like budgets, policies, priorities, et cetera. So what we've seen so far is in many cases some rapid actions, but also some delays of things. We've seen a number of calls for public forum opportunities such as events to be canceled because the government speakers have had to withdraw. We've seen GSA announce a hold on acquisitions to give them time to decide and determine which ones they want to move forward with. And of course, the one that got the most attention was the decide to postpone aid in the form of grants and loans that ultimately got rescinded. But that's the type of thing that's causing delays and sort of suspension of activities that I think is going to further push money later into the fiscal year and due in large part to this transition that's taking place. And then as you think about budget, this is another area to be just mindful of in terms of the timing and ability for the Trump administration to put their footprint on the budget. The FY 2025 budget, in theory, the president's budget is set, but it was set by the Biden administration. The bipartisan two-year funding agreement is still in place. So in theory, for FY 2025, the discretionary dollars have been set. Now, that doesn't mean Congress can't undo that work and come up with some other level of appropriation for the balance of this year. I suspect they're going to want to try to get 2025 behind them and just fund it at the level that was identified in that bipartisan budget agreement. And all eyes will turn to the FY 26 budget. And what that budget looks like largely is composed and drafted under the Biden administration. So the Trump administration is, making fast work trying to revamp that budget request. And it'll be interesting to see how that budget request comes off. But I think you're going to start to see the legislative activities almost take over what happens with the budget for next year as that gets pulled into the tax extensions, some of the other policies of the administration, some of the efforts of the DOGE group to reduce dollars spent in various agencies. So 2026 is, I think, they're going to be the first big year of swing. And then as you think about the new administration, with them having their leadership in place and really the first opportunity to fully wield their policy priorities into the budget and influence the budget, it's really the FY 2027 budget that we expect to fully bake the Trump administration's policies and priorities into that budget request for the next fiscal year. So with the administration transition and the Trump administration plans, we divided sort of some of the things around agency agenda on the right-hand side, as well as legislative and policy initiatives on the left-hand side. Some of the ones I won't go through all of these, but we'll leave this as a reference, and happy to share these slides, by the way, as well. On the left are some of the policy priorities and legislative priorities of the Trump administration that have been stated in some part during the campaign process. We've already seen a hiring freeze put in place. We've seen the return to work and return to office orders. We've seen already agencies being notified about the offer for people to resign in return for getting compensation for a fair portion of the rest of the fiscal year. So they're clearly trying to make headway in terms of reducing the federal workforce by making it uncomfortable, as well as making it providing some encouragement to have people leave government. Because of the broad stroke brush on this, it's hard to predict how this will affect agencies. Various agencies could be affected in different ways. They have excluded certain areas like immigration and national defense from those reductions. But other agencies that have staffing shortages or noted staffing shortages could face even stiffer still staffing shortages to the extent that these policies are sort of cast with a bit of a broad brush versus more strategically. We do think you're going to see big changes to things like Ukraine funding and some of the defense funding that we've provided overseas. But overall, I think there's generally bipartisan support that the Defense Department, given the unique and complex nature of the national security issues that we face, will continue to have increasing budgets for the Defense Department. I think it's just some of the funding that goes to support some of our partners internationally could be called into question and could be at risk. We're going to talk more about the DOGE. The DOGE is going to be its interesting topic all by itself. One of this is the initiative led by Elon Musk. There was a lot of indications early on that the administration doesn't have the ability to create a new agency, this Department of Government Efficiency, without legislative support. They navigated around that by repurposing an existing agency called the U.S. Digital Service. They've renamed the U.S. Digital Service the U.S. DOGE Service and sort of tweaked its mission a little bit, but that way they sort of got around the need for a legislative body to be created. And the impact of that is that organization is in place, has people that they're hiring rapidly to help identify and make recommendations about areas for cost savings. Part of the executive order that created this new organization, or it should say modified the USDS organization, also called for each agency to appoint 4 people to lead the DOGE agency initiative. So basically working with inside the agencies to identify priorities. This was composed of people that are responsible for operations, HR, as well as legal partners to identify legal issues and challenges that they need to navigate to implement some of the cost savings. A number of areas that we think are going to be areas of emphasis. There's obviously a lot of GAO reports and Inspector General reports that have identified areas of opportunity in terms of cost savings and inefficiencies for government agencies. So that's going to be an area of quick attention. Procurement practices has also been discussed. There's been a discussion about continuing to push agencies to move away from cost plus contracts in favor of fixed price contracts. That does carry obviously its own challenges, and that's been something that lots of administrations have tried to make progress on. Yet cost plus contracting is still very healthy and doing well in government in the government contracting environment. Ferreting out fraud, waste, and abuse, so improper payments where money is being spent that is fraudulent or abusive is going to be another area of target. And you can look at areas like healthcare, some defense areas as opportunities there. And then IT modernization was also called out, specifically software modernization. Many administrations also have made IT modernization in government agencies a priority. So that's not a newsworthy item necessarily, but it is important to note that the administration called out specifically software modernization as an area of opportunity that is going to get attention from the DOGE organization. And you can get a sense for the opportunity there. This is basically a look at federal IT budgets and how much of it goes to operations and maintenance versus what they call development, modernization, and enhancements. And 78% of the IT budgets are for O&M activities. So the goal is to reduce the O&M component, reduce the cost of operations to free up money to invest more in modernization and enhancement initiatives. As we talked about already, there's a focus on reducing the size of the federal workforce. You can see on the left-hand side the steady growth that we've seen in federal employment rose about 4.5% even during the prior Trump first term. So this is going to be a clear charge to reverse the trend in federal employment. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the percent of eligible employees for telework. This just gives you a picture of the percentage of employees that might find it particularly uncomfortable that they've had that return to office and are compelled to look elsewhere for sort of their quality of life and balancing their life in favor of a job that maybe allows them more telework. So a very challenging, I think, environment for our federal employee counterparts that many of you work with or are trying to sell to. So I think it's important to be cognizant of that disruption that's taking place in the environment that they're working in and be sensitive to that, as well as recognize that that's likely going to cause some delays in some contracts and initiatives that would otherwise continue to move forward without the administration change. Wanted to spend a few minutes on small business contracting. I think one of the earliest signs already that we've seen of change in policy is a move away from the increased small disadvantaged business policies of the Biden administration. Under the Biden administration for FY25, the challenge for agencies would have been to achieve 15% of contracting with small disadvantaged businesses. The SBA just released the goals for agencies for FY 2025, literally at the end of January, and every agency has a goal of 5%. Just for a little bit of background, the government-wide goal is 5%. The SBA historically has assigned specific goals to specific agencies for their small disadvantaged business contracting. So the fact that they just took every agency to 5% is really just a recognition that the equity sort of we'll say the equity initiative from a contracting perspective of the Biden administration has been cast aside, and the new administration is focused on adhering to the current law, which is 5%. Some other areas to be mindful of, the increased scrutiny or attention being paid to mentor-protege and mentor-protege joint ventures. If you are a proposal manager who's been bidding on IDIQs, the chances are as you get into the past performance criteria and some of the scoring sheets for some of the major IDIQ contracts, it becomes pretty clear that the past performance is a key component to success. And one of the ways that a small business can improve their past performance depth is to partner with a mentor and a mentor-protege joint venture and bid as a combined entity as a mentor-protege joint venture and bring together the combined past performance of both entities. So if you look at some of the IDIQs, many of the companies that are winning the prime positions on them are these mentor-protege joint ventures, and I think the SBA has taken notice of this and is trying to put in place some policy changes to reduce the need for a small business to feel like they have to be part of a mentor-protege joint venture in order to be successful. Some of the things that have been floated is not allowing mentor-protege joint ventures to bid on IDIQ contracts, and the other is not allowing them to bid on contracts over 5 years in length. They've sought industry feedback on this. They've talked in a number of industry fora about this, so we're waiting for some kind of proposed rule to see how they navigate that particular issue. From an acquisition and technology point of view, I would say the other area that is going to be important for companies to watch is around compliance. If you're a proposal manager who's bid on some of these large IDIQ contracts and have looked at the Section L and Section M and the scoring sheets, you've noticed the great deal of focus and emphasis on your ability to comply with certain business system requirements, as well as having certain ISO or CMM certifications. So they're basically giving you quite a bit of credit on the proposal for your ability to comply with some of the work requirements of certain agencies that require, say, cost plus contracts or certain business system requirements like earned value management. So we think it's really important for companies to be mindful of compliance, especially small businesses, as a way of differentiation. Don't think of compliance necessarily purely as this begrudged task that you have to do to win a government contract, but think of it as an opportunity to differentiate yourself versus other companies who maybe aren't willing to make those investments in those compliance systems. We do think there's going to be an effort by the new administration to reduce the complexity of regulations. It remains to be seen to what extent that will impact acquisition regulations. I would say areas that might be get some focuses around small business contracting and reducing some of the red tape and regulation around small business contracting, which has grown pretty complex. We're going to talk about cybersecurity in a moment. It does not seem that cybersecurity is going to be an area where you're going to see a lot of activity in terms of deregulation. I think the CMMC is here to stay. It actually was put forward under the Trump administration originally, so we know there's support already from the leadership for that kind of stringent cybersecurity practice, and that's really viewed as a national security issue versus sort of a regulation versus deregulation issue. So from that point of view, cybersecurity, we've seen the rule put out for CMMC in 2025. We're expecting to start to see requirements baked into RFPs for CMMC compliance. Many of you who may not have been paying attention to this are probably rapidly figuring out what you need to do to achieve certain levels of CMMC compliance in order for you to be viable bidders on certain opportunities that are going to come out of the Department of Defense. We also see a lot of focus on supply chain, and I don't think that's going to go away under the new administration. There's definitely a focus on creating new jobs in manufacturing in the US. There's that new FAR Part 40, which is getting put out, which is focused around cybersecurity supply chain requirements and gathering all of the different FAR language that deals with that into a single FAR part. And so that's going to be another area to pay attention to, is the supply chain of products that you're pulling together for your government customers and maximizing their bill either in the US or definitely not with certain partners or certain countries that we would regard as non-friendly countries. Artificial intelligence, I think, is another area ripe for acceleration. The Trump administration, under one of its first executive orders, was to repeal the artificial intelligence executive orders of the Biden administration. They were not replaced by new guidance, so agencies at the moment are sort of left to their own devices to figure out what their AI policy is. But we do expect the new CIO and the new OMB IT leadership to very quickly put in place some guidance for agencies around the implementation of artificial intelligence, with the goal of accelerating adoption to help support the cost savings that DOGE is looking to achieve across government agencies. And then I touched on this a little bit with some of the market dynamics, but with the combination of the increase in compliance requirements, as well as the increased adoption of IDIQ and GWAC contracts, the number of unique prime contract positions in government has been going down. So despite the strong growth in spending, the number of companies participating in the market as primes, at least, has been declining. You can see here in the blue bar showing contract spending in the last several years has been growing pretty rapidly. And then in the orange, you can see the number of unique contractors has been steadily declining to the point that it's now almost below 100,000 unique companies providing services to government agencies. It has started to slow, and there is I think, attention on this issue from a contracting point of view. It'll be interesting to see how the new administration and the new leadership in the Office of Federal Procurement Policy chooses to address this issue. But when you consider the adoption of IDIQ contracts, category management policies, which are defined or created to help drive companies to be essentially accessed through these IDIQ contracts, and driving agencies to use the best-in-class contracts, we do think that this trend is a challenging trend for companies that are looking to win their first prime contract. And so a lot of companies, I think, that are participating in the market are participating as subcontractors with the hope of winning opportunities to bid as a prime. So as you're thinking about just some areas of opportunity and challenge, obviously you need to pay careful attention to those compliance requirements. The extent that you can increase your ability to comply with various business systems, ISO certifications, et cetera, is going to give you a much better opportunity to be competitive on some of the RFPs that are coming out. Just as we've seen the pattern of the IDIQs to date, they give a lot of weight. In some cases, 15 to 20% of the weight of the points that you can get are just focused purely around compliance. From a contract performance point of view, it's particularly important that you work with your government customers and partners to support them in defining and demonstrating the quality of the work that you're doing and the benefit of the work that you're doing, especially to the extent that it aligns to initiatives that come out of DOGE. Are you helping to save money? Are you helping to drive efficiency? You want to be focused on those areas and supporting the government customers that are the career leaders you're probably working with, to help them make the case of how your contracts and your programs are supporting the administrative priorities. The executive orders and policies coming out of the administration are coming in rapid fashion. We're just a few short weeks in, and we've already seen dozens upon dozens of executive orders and policies. There's a lot of disruption going on in the market, and that's going to start to settle here soon. But we do think there's still going to be a long list as you think about that transition and the leadership moving into place over the course of the months ahead, a long list of priorities and policies that are going to come out agency by agency that are going to start to impact how your company does business in a lot of these agencies. So it's important to stay current on those policies. Also, as you're thinking about your competitive posture, to the extent the joint ventures are still given the same weight as a regular small business, it's important to consider your teaming strategies for opportunities that are coming out, particularly under those GWACs and MAC contracts. just to looking at those as a way of competitively differentiating yourself by marrying yourself to a large business that has deeper past performance that can help you win. So no shortage of challenges, but certainly I think the new administration also brings lots of opportunities, whether it be in areas of healthcare modernization, technology modernization. Obviously, on the national defense front and immigration, there's going to be lots of need for contractors to support that. Areas that I think are going to be at risk. Think about the State Department, international aid, so U.S. Agency for International Development, climate policies such as the EPA. If you look at the past administration for Trump, there was an annual effort to significantly reduce State Department and EPA budgets that were unsuccessful because they couldn't get appropriators to support that. But obviously, we have an administration in both houses of Congress controlled by the Republican Party. So it would seem that on the surface, it might be easier for them to get some of the things that they want to get done and might be more supportive of the administration's priorities. But we will have to wait and see how that transpires. So with that, again, I wanted to just thank the APMP and the Chesapeake chapter for the invitation to join you, and we're going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. Thank you.